philosophizing on the descent from God and any sort of belief or verdict in believing or attempting to constitute God that cannot be well defined. In fact, what can be well defined and what is more true and which aligns an individual agent on a path of enlightenment towards more liberation of what is intrinsic and an agency that cannot be taken away from the subjective experience of an individual who is thoughtful of the self and who seeks to not just embody what's meaningful to them, but to become more of themselves, and which awakens a greater sense of self-intelligence through a pathway towards Buddhahood, which is actually true and which can be validated through our direct perceptions and through our precepts and perceptiveness of what's external to us and the meaning that we create. Not just meaning we make, but the creation of meaning through our creator instinct and our navigations, our ops, and which is a liberation upon nature itself through our synthetic materialism that we subjectively, objectively synthesize and form these subjective-objective relationships that constitute the psychological domain of our existence and our existential endeavoring towards meaning creation and not just creation, but a comprehension of the self that is a liberation of meaningful emotions and that liberates us towards greater thoughtfulness through the capacity to well-define ourselves and well-define what's meaningful to I. And what matters, not just what's meaningful, but matters and is interwoven within the subjective-objective fibers and fabrics of being through these cause and effect relationships direct through our perceptions in which we conduct our perception, action, and behavior towards these repertoires of meaning and repertoires of purposefulness and purposing what matters to us, and which can bring upon a great self-virtuousness in the uptaking of responsibility if we so choose to create a meaning that's forged within the forward onlookings to which we direct forward our meaningful emotions through our own internal navigations of what matters and which we attend to, not just through a mindful nature, but most importantly through a thoughtfulness that we would not have access to in terms of understanding certain exercises that can increase our capacity to think and create meaning if it wasn't for the Western philosophizers and philosophers, particularly Aristotle, who instantiated these ideas of the self initially and discussed and really pioneered these ideas of what it means to live a meaningful life through understanding the self and the nature of the self and how to individuate ourselves from others. Now, Aristotle didn't do as much in terms of individualization or individualizing. In fact, actually, it was only more recently that we see even the instantiation of the term individualization, and individuation is more something that Carl Jung has discussed more about. But individualizing and separating ourselves from others and understanding the difference between me and you and what are my strengths and your strengths and how those can be corroborated to create a greater symbiosis within the external surrounds environment that contributes to the goods and that we enjoy in your day-to-day and which exemplifies and validates merit. So if I want you to think about this concept of merit, like where do we get that? It actually emanates from what we respect and what models the highest self-virtues that we see exemplified in others that we would like to see copied and repeated by others, or also which we might aspire to and which we're inspired by. And inspiration is very much something that we gather from our surrounds, but aspiration, it comes from the self, and it comes through this meaning creation process that aligns us towards Buddhahood. And that you have to do, what you have to do is you have to step away from these ideological notions of a God, something that can't be well defined and which orients you towards something that is more direct to perception and which is more true in some sense and more validly true and enlightening, and which comes to the eye much like the sun radiates and emanates its energy, in which we would not have a life if it wasn't for the light source of the sun and the illuminations around us that grant color to vision and which open us up to a purposefulness and to purposing things and to interacting with objects that in very much matter to the self, and through the creating of meaning that we get through emotions that don't start necessarily as meaningful emotions unless we agentically necessitate it. And we have to engage that creation of meaning process through an aspirational process of subjective objective unification that we conduct through our direct perceptions, action, and behavior. So that's all I wanted to say for this video. I hope you enjoy it. Bye.